So welcome back, David and members of the governing body. So we are just about at the point where, having gone through our questions, we can go in reverse order to speak to the resolution. What I'd like to do is the Deputy Mayor on the line. Are you there, Bill?
Yes, I am, Phil.
Okay, I just want to foreshadow, so and I can do it with your approval, that we add to that list Councillor Newman, and then if people have got further suggestions, obviously the way they do that will be to move that by amendment. But if you're happy with that addition, I've had the chance to talk to a number of councillors, and that amendment is generally supported, I think.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, that's good. So I'll change that accordingly. Now, in order, because I don't want anybody to lose their ability to move an amendment, if there are any amendments to that, could they be with Sandra at the moment? Wayne, Councillor Walker, you've foreshadowed that you had an amendment.
Yeah, and I've just put that in the conversation. I'm assuming that Sandra can get it.
That the Emergency Committee be advised of the prioritised list for submitting to the government as soon as practically possible, subject to the agreement of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm happy to accept that rather than move it as an amendment. So we'll add that in as well. Has anybody else got an amendment?
Thanks, Phil.
Yep. If anybody else has got an amendment, can they please get it to Sandra before they speak? And as soon as possible. So I'll work in reverse order, starting with Councillor Paul Young. Paul, is there any further comments you need to add?
No comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I just, like I did yesterday, advise councillors, please don't feel obliged to speak if somebody else has made the points, but if there's something that hasn't been said and you think is important, obviously you'll want to take the call. Councillor John Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bean. I've got a couple of quick comments I'll make, and some of them are obvious and I think should be put on the record. Firstly, I think that notion of transparency is an important one in this process. It is an unusual time, as we all know, and it's very important, I think, for our confidence, but also for the people in the community, because already, we're seeing a degree of angst over council activities. Now, in the middle of a pandemic, maybe not even the middle, we should be looking to avoid that kind of perception of divisiveness or angst or disagreement, and we've already had it, unfortunately, in respect of this item we're dealing with today. There was a big headline in the Herald about the jobs versus climate change, the debate raging at Auckland Council. Well, in actual fact, it's nothing of the sort, or it certainly shouldn't be anything of the sort. As anyone that looks at the process that's emerging here, it's clear that the government, fortunately, will be making the call anyway, a little bit like the America's Cup bases, if we're going to be honest, and that will be a good thing. We have to put forward our projects. We're doing a whole swag of them, most of which, as we know, won't be considered. Every other council in New Zealand's doing that. But I think it's important, and this goes really to the point, to the delegation, of having confidence. So if we have public comments going out about wars over climate change, over some sense of environmental kind of warriors taking on the rest of the council, that's not helpful, Mr. Mayor, and that sort of commentary needs to be nipped in the bud. You're doing your best to try and maintain this notion of esprit de corps and people working together. It's important that the rest of us pitch in with that, and that people that don't get given the message, because our community is vulnerable when they listen to lists of projects being considered, and the presentation that has taken place in some respects of a lolly scramble, which it's nothing of the sort. It's very important that we distance the political input in this, and that's why I made my request, which I sense from you you're not keen to take up, where we actually reduce the political input into this decision making, or this oversight, as it is. It's not really decision making, but oversight. Failing a willingness to do that, then I think it's really important that the people that are on this delegated group capture or represent that confidence of their colleagues in the first instance, and secondly, and more importantly, of the public. And I'm not sure that that's the case in this instance. So that's why I put forward the notion of reducing. But it is very important for people to have confidence in this process, given the sense that we know things are going to be very tough and for a long period of time, and that conceivably projects that come through this, might be some of the few things that are happening, or new things that are happening. So that being the backdrop, very important that the personnel that are sent to do the delegation are, first of all, very fair and take a regional view in the first instance. And secondly, any comments they're making publicly don't undercut what you and the rest of the council is trying to do as a whole. So depending on the personnel that come up in the list, that's how I'll be voting. I'll be looking to vote and back people who have displayed that through the couple of weeks we've had so far, and I'm sure will continue to do so as this process continues.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, just a very brief comment, if you don't mind. Yeah, at the time when we're all facing a crisis, the last thing the public wants is divisiveness and, obvious and personality-based disagreements between people. We don't want that. And you're right. There's no dichotomy between creating jobs and dealing with climate change. I think I can say every councillor on our governing body and the IMSB both believe that those two goals are equally important and not contradictory. So thank you for making that point. Councillor Wayne Walker. Sorry, Councillor Walker, are you there?
Sure. I want to talk to two things. First, to the delegation. My preference is for the delegation to be simply the mayor and the deputy mayor. All right. If speed is of the essence, and there's a need to obviously communicate and get to people, I don't have an issue with that. Having said that, if that is coupled with transparency, so as I'm suggesting in that addition, you do get something out to councillors as soon as practically possible, then we have some inclusiveness. And perhaps in addition to that, there may be a mechanism between yourself and the deputy can be more inclusive, but that's largely up to you within the time frame. So that's my position. So if there is a vote, and I'm asking for the vote to be taken separately, I have an issue with E as it stands. And I would suggest that it's just the mayor and the deputy mayor. Did you get that, Phil?
Talking to myself, I pushed the button twice and the mic went off and on. Yeah, look, if anybody wants to move that it's the mayor and deputy mayor, they're welcome to do that. Unfortunately, you didn't move that before you spoke.
I'll second it.
But my preference, I'm quite clear. Sorry, Wayne, can you turn your mic off because I'm getting feedback? Thank you. My preference is to have a wider group along the lines that I've talked about. I want people to feel that this has been broadly considered and that it has the council as a whole behind it, even if, having set the criteria, it will be officer driven. That's my own preference, but somebody else, when the point comes before they speak, if they want to move that, they're welcome to do so. Okay, IMSB Chair David Typery.
Kia ora, Your Worship. I wasn't really going to speak, but I will now. In terms of the recommendations through to E, inclusive of Councillor Daniel Newman being put in, I would support those. I do have a question procedurally around F as part of the substantive, because I consider that a contradictory motion. Although if it stopped that as soon as practically possible, then I would see no issue. But I do think that that's a contradiction. And so I'm not sure whether this has been put up as an amendment or it's been put up as part of the substantive. So again, I support through A to E, but currently as F is proposed, I'm against that because I think that's a contradictory motion and it's not been put up as an amendment. Kia ora.
Thank you. I can.
Look, I can't hear you, Your Worship.
No. I've got the mic on properly now. I said I will take E and F separately if that's. Well, I can take any of the recommendations separately at the request of any councillor. So I've had requests to take E and F separately, and I'll do so. If anybody wanted to make an amendment to narrow the committee to the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, I'm not personally in favour of doing that, but please get the amendment in to Sandra before you speak.
Point of order, Your Worship. I've got this on my screen of comments. There is an amendment. I'm just not sure the process under Skype.
Okay. I think if you can, I'll just get some guidance from Sandra on that. Sandra, you'd prefer.
It's not my amendment. I'm saying I'm reading it.
No, I understand what you're saying.
So, just to Your Worship, it was me that had the speaking time, and I wanted clarification on the very matter around F of what is it proposed.
Okay. Happy to do that. What if, and the reason why that I accepted it is because that we will be advising you of the prioritised list that goes to the government as soon as practically possible. So there's no problem in that for me, David.
No, that's my point. I agree with that. But if it's at full stop as practically possible, but then it says subject to the agreement of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, which is what I consider the contradiction of terms.
Yep. Okay. Let's delete that part. I'm with the agreement of my seconder, Deputy Mayor. We just need the first part of the sentence, in my view. Are you happy with that, Bill?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's all good.
Okay. No,
well,
thanks.
On that basis, Your Worship, I'm happy to support A through to F.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Stewart.
I'm fine with that, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support the recommendation as it's up there. I would like to just, on behalf of my constituents, speak about a couple of the projects. One is the Norwestern Busway project and the delivery there. I'd like to support Councillor Henderson and Councillor Cooper in their comments on that project over the last couple of days. It has benefit to Rodney as well as the West, and I think meets many of the criteria. The other one, I think Councillor Newman spoke to this in our workshop, was the road renewals. Obviously, that's a regional program, and I just I'm sure all councillors will be aware of the sweating of the assets, for want of a better word, through our roading networks, and it would be great to see some time and energy and money going into that. And locally, just the support from my local board, the project's on there, which is another regional one, the Seal Extension Program. Rodney does benefit quite significantly from that, but the projects do extend outside of just the Rodney ward into Franklin and the islands as well. And the Matakana Link Road is one I'd like to particularly just bring attention to, because as I've been listening to the debate, which has been most helpful, that idea of the future or the further multipliers, just so my colleagues are aware that that road's kind of ready to go, and it opens up a lot of industrial land and a lot of housing land as a result of it being built. And the other one we had in there is a project that's been around for a long time, waiting for some funding, around the Kinyu Huapai State Highway 16 project, resultant from a lot of the special housing areas that went in there, and a lot of safety issues that have resulted from the increased traffic there. So just on behalf of my constituency, I felt I should just highlight those and put them forward as I could. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Because my name's been mentioned in terms of this group, I don't really wish to speak to individual projects now. My preference would be to keep it narrow, as we've discussed, but if that's not your preference, and ultimately I think you have to be comfortable with how this is going to go, then thank you very much for your consideration, including me. I think that ultimately this will need to be a process where we come back to the professional analysis from Watercare, Auckland Transport, Healthy Waters and Council proper to ensure that we are driving from an asset management and asset development perspective the construction opportunities that we can deliver to reflect the criteria of government, the criteria that need to expand on the opportunities for immediate construction and job benefits, but also through the supply chain and the multiplier effects. And one of the issues that needs to come to the fore is the benefits of the multipliers, which is about the growth, which will generate the development contributions, which will be helpful in terms of our revenue position moving forward. Thank you for leading the discussion. I think it's been a useful discussion, and I'm very happy to participate.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just to foreshadow, I have an amendment moved by Councillor Henderson to add Councillor Linda Cooper to the group. That would take us to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do I have a seconder for that? Somebody like to second that?
Well, I can't. I've just spoken.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, thank you. So we can at this stage probably it depends how many more amendments are put forward. I think we can probably contemplate 7. I really don't want to go beyond that level. So if there are no other amendments to add to it, I'd ask the Deputy Chair if he is happy to accept that as an amendment.
Your Worship, I did before move the amendment as you invited us to, that it just be yourself and the Deputy Mayor. And I understood that Tracy Mulholland seconded that.
Okay, I'll deal with that in just one moment. So Deputy Mayor Cashmore is happy to accept that. So we'll add the name Linda Cooper. If I think we'll accept then as an alternative amendment that is being moved by Councillor Fletcher, that delegate to the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and then the rest of the sentence, the final approval of Auckland Council's prioritised list of shovel-ready project programs, etc. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? I'm not prepared to accept it because I don't want to go that way as part of the resolution.
Your Worship, I'd already seconded it.
That's Linda Cooper?
Sometime back.
Oh, no, Tracy, sorry. Okay, so that's moved and seconded.
Your Worship, in terms of precedent, that was actually moved before the most recent one, and I moved it because you invited us to do so, and in light of the debate that I
Sorry,
had.
I hadn't been notified that that had been received, but now that is the amendment. People would speak to the amendment first, and then once we've dealt with the amendment, we'll come back to the substantive motion. So if anybody wants to speak to that, Councillor Fletcher, I presume as mover you would like to speak to that?
Oh, Your Worship, thank you for that opportunity. And as I highlighted before, these are extraordinary times, and we are wanting to be able to demonstrate to all of our constituents that we are working in the most united way possible and not working as part of any particular political grouping. The difficulty I'm hearing as we are hearing more and more names at it is just going to be how practical it is. to be nimble. And then if you accept my concerns that I want complete contestability in this and neutrality, I'm probably going to add more names. So having heard the debate, I think that on balance it is better for just yourself and the Deputy Mayor to be our representatives. We have confidence in the officers who are working on this, so that, you know, this is a time for us to think as regionally, as regional council as we possibly can, and in the most independent and neutral way that we can in the best interests of Aucklanders. So I think that on balance it's better to go down the pathway of yourself and the Deputy Mayor working with our most senior officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mulholland, would you like to speak to that as the seconder?
Thank you, Your Worship. I tautoko those comments from Councillor Fletcher. After much consideration and listening to the debate and seeing that it is still political and people are making political comments, I have much faith in the system where we have the executive team working on this project, and that I have complete confidence in yourself, Your Worship, and the Deputy Mayor to move this from being a political debate, of which it is. And I believe that it would add to the faith and confidence of Aucklanders that we have the two most senior politicians, yourself and the Deputy. So I believe it is the right thing to do to remove any question by any member of the public or councillors and staff, that we allow you, considering the debate that has already taken place in conversation, that we allow you the final sign-off of those projects. And in terms of transparency, fairness, equity and reason, you both have those competencies, and I believe it moves it away from any future debate. Now that will take place and people will accuse councillors of favouritism, so I think it removes those. And whilst I absolutely acknowledge, Your Worship, that it may not be your preference, I would seek you to consider the future fallout of this and what may occur, the same as I'm seeing commentary already on the matter of financing, of which each and every one of us are already entitled to and have made a position prior to being elected on that matter. So I do have confidence that this would be the best way moving forward. Kia ora, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor, for those comments. I feel bad speaking against the motion after you said such kind things about the Deputy Mayor and myself. But I'll tell you why I don't support the amendment, and it's up to councillors to vote how they believe on it. I think, as I've said before, we will be guided by the professional officers in terms of the projects that they put up, which will be consistent with the criteria that we've already set as a council. But I really would like to see a broader cross-section of people rather than just the Deputy Mayor and myself to give the tick-off to that, so that there is some confidence that we have people from, you know, all sides of the council debate, and I think with the addition of Councillor Cooper, people from all parts of the region, that would be, I would rather do it in that way, so that transparently a cross-section of councillors have approved this, and it takes the politics out of it. I don't think there is politics in it, to be honest, but it could be interpreted in that way. So I don't think it's going to take the spade work will be done by the professional officers. I don't see the delegated group having to spend hours and hours on this, but rather just to look over that, listen to the arguments that the officers have put up, raise any particular questions about things that might have been overlooked, and then reach an agreement on those priority projects. So as Mayor, I would be more comfortable having a group of you as councillors around myself and the Deputy Mayor to say, we've looked at that. The process was good. The recommendations were sound. Hey, by the way, did you consider such and such? If not, maybe we could add that in. That's how I see the process working, and I see it as being more democratic if we have a subgroup of council rather than just delegating to myself and the deputy. There would be a whole lot of issues where that delegation would be appropriate, but I think in the special circumstances and times, I would rather see a somewhat broader group giving the tick off to the recommendations that go forward. So that's all I want to add. Are there any further speakers?
I would like to speak. I'd like to ask a question and speak. It's Kathy.
Kathy, Councillor Casey, yep.
Could you please read me out the amendment?
Yeah, the amendment moved by Councillor Fletcher is delegate to the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor the final approval of Auckland Council's prioritised list of shovel-ready projects programs, programs to Council Infrastructure Partners Limited on or before Tuesday the 14th of April 2020.
Thank you. I'd like to speak strongly against it.
Okay,
if I may.
Councillor Casey has the floor.
I think all my colleagues should have paid attention to the speech made by my colleague John Watson. These are difficult times, and it's a time for us all to be pulling together consensus politics. This amendment actually negates the involvement of Councillor Darby, Councillor Simpson, and David Typery, the chair of the Independent Māori Statutory Board. I have no idea why that would be a good idea. Indeed, if people want to be on this committee, put them on it. This is a time for us all to be involved and to get to the end of the process via consensus. And so I think this is a divisive political amendment. And you know what? I am really tired of that kind of politics. It's time for us all to throw this out and get back to what we're supposed to be doing, getting Auckland through this time of crisis. We are working together. Thank you so much, John Watson. That was the best speech I heard today.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say something. It's Bill, if it's all right.
Sorry, can you hear me on that? I'm making the mistake others are of leaving my mic off. We've had 2 speeches for, 2 against. So I'll take 1 further speech for, 1 further against. Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashmore has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think what we've got to recall as a group is that this is a government-led process. So the timeframes, although they are tight, we have managed it before. It has put a lot of pressure on our staff, and we need to have faith in the work that they're doing. So that's my first point. I believe these sorts of decisions have to be based upon data and upon known knowledge, just as we did with the ATAP agreements. There was no parochialism in it. It was purely about what is best for the city. The second point I'd make is, although it was nice to have Councillor Mulholland say nice things about us, Phil, it's the degree of responsibility we have here. We also have a chance to share it with other councillors. We get that greater geographical spread, we get that greater degree of input, and I think that's a positive attribute for the process that's outlined in the substantive motion. And